Xuan is almost here, and now we have her official kit. So far, she looks absolutely amazing, and I'm really excited. I'll leave a link to the page if you want to see it, but I'll go over quickly and then provide my initial thoughts on her pull value. Let's start with Xuan's technique. Upon activation, the team receives a barrier, which prevents enemies from attacking you to enter battle. When you do enter battle though, you'll go in with the Matrix of Prescience activated, which is explained by her skill. Using her skill activates the Matrix of Prescience, which transfers a proportion, so not completely, of damage other allies take to Xuan. It also activates a field where allies will gain max HP and crit rate. Her talent passively reduces the damage that all allies take. Also, when Xuan's current HP falls below a certain threshold, her talent will proc to restore a certain amount of her HP. It can only trigger once initially, and at most, twice. Finally, Xuan's ultimate deals AoE damage and increases the number of times Xuan's talent can trigger to 2 instead of 1. Let's backtrack real quick and take a look at her major traces since they have a lot of impact on her functionality. They look fun to pronounce, so I'll give them a shot. Tai Yi, the macrocosmic, will let Xuan regen more energy if she uses her skill, while the Matrix of Prescience is active. Dunjia, the metamystic, will also let Xuan heal all other allies, so not including herself, when she uses her ult. This is a pretty big one, but we'll need to wait for her release to see how much this heals. Yurin, the sexagenary, pretty much just gives your team one instance of crowd control immunity when the Matrix of Prescience is active. This sounds like it'll work for AoE crowd control applications as well, and it resets its use every time the Matrix is activated again. So what do I think? In my experience with these kinds of games, damage mitigation is often the most valuable form of defensive utility. That's not to say healing isn't as good or Xuan's gonna straight up power creep Luocha, but preemptive action often trumps reactive ones. And now that I think about it, this principle sort of applies to lots of things in life, but let's not get too carried away. Why solve a problem when you can just prevent it from happening in the first place? That's the message I'll leave for you today. Xuan is capable of reducing incoming damage, and that's going to be extremely valuable, whether you're trying to clear Memory of Chaos or Swarm Disaster. Let's take a look at what Xuan offers and how it measures up with the other currently released characters. Keep in mind that I'll always advocate for enjoyment first before strength, so don't let this video or anything else you hear stop you from going for a character you like. That being said, we're evaluating Xuan from a solo sustain meta perspective to help those of you in need of a second opinion. Bailu is actually a great character that can easily solo sustain once you've invested enough into her. She's got damage mitigation and reactive healing in the way of invigoration and her major traces. She's got a great team-wide emergency heal and a one-time revive, which will come in handy when your Tingyun gets one shot. Her skill is a bounce heal that can be clutch, but ideally you don't want to be using it too often anyway. The only real drawbacks to Bailu is she doesn't have any crowd control immunity or a way to cleanse allies of debuffs and CC. She also doesn't provide anything in the form of buffs, but we aren't really expecting abundance or preservation characters too. It's just a nice bonus. Given that Xuan has all of what Bailu has and more, I'd say Xuan's a pretty big upgrade, albeit healing a lot less, but that's less required since you've got so much more damage mitigation. And also at the cost of needing to use an extra skill point here or there, but that'll be a common trend with all these comparisons. That being said, having Bailu or any of the following characters definitely makes pulling Xuan a lot less valuable, since they fill the exact same role and they can already do it successfully. Gepard provides a massive shield to the team with his ult. He's like a Zhongli. And he's also got a one-time self-revive. The size of his shield is actually quite large, and even in the hardest content he's able to solo sustain with ease, provided he's highly invested. He's also got some added utility in that he can single target freeze with his skill. He doesn't need to use it that often though, so he's very skill point efficient. Between his major trace and Landau's or his signature, he also has an immense taunt value that almost ensures he gets attacked the most, which is the best case scenario since he can mitigate a ton of incoming damage with his high defense, as well as regenerating energy for his ult. When looking at it this way, you can definitely see the similarities between him and Xuan. Just like Bailu though, he's got some drawbacks in that he can't prevent or remove CC and debuffs from allies. Also, his shield coming from his ult, while not being that big of an issue, does have a problem of not being truly on demand, and you might find yourself in situations where you need the shield but it's not available. Another case is when you give your characters extra actions or just make them go multiple times in a row before Gepard can, and the shield just expires, leaving them unprotected. Bronya is definitely a culprit here, and it's pretty anti-synergistic since she can make your DPS susceptible this way. Lastly, Gepard doesn't heal, so any damage you take is permanent, which might make some runs feel less comfy, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal when your shield is that massive. Gepard also doesn't provide the team with any buffs, but again, this is more of a nitpick. That being said, he doesn't have any issues solo sustaining the hardest content in the game, so while Xuan will almost certainly be an upgrade, I would say you definitely don't need her if you already have a well-built Gepard. The biggest advantage with Xuan in this case is her damage mitigation comes from her skill, unlike Gepard's coming from his ult. Finally, Luocha. The one key difference Luocha doesn't have that the others do is that he has no form of damage mitigation, unless you have E4, but let's be real. Luocha has undoubtedly the best healing in the game, not only in terms of volume, but also in quality. His field's healing is extremely efficient and doesn't hinder your damage dealers in any way. He's also got a massive single target emergency heal that auto casts when an ally is at half or lower HP, though it can only be triggered once every 2 of his turns. He's got CC and debuff removal in the form of his skill, and he's got a unique ult in that it can AoE strip buffs from enemies. Of the 3 we've discussed so far, he's also most likely to be completely skill point positive, never needing to manually cast a skill once. Also, it's important to note that he's got an Omega CC resist for himself with his A6 trace. 70% is crazy. Even though he doesn't have an emergency team-wide heal or shield, you'll rarely find yourself in situations where you'll need it, and even less frequently, you'll find him unable to move. So how does this compare to Xuan? While they're both designated as solo sustainers, their actual function is completely different. Both of them excel in different areas and don't really have any drawbacks. Like, I can't really nitpick anything. I can't say either is definitively an upgrade over the other, but this is actually a plus for Xuan. We already know how much value Luocha brings to a team, and he can keep everyone alive no problem. The fact that Xuan's comparable to Luocha speaks volumes about her strength, and I do feel like she'll be comfier given her proactive damage mitigation. You'll definitely notice this aspect of her more in content where enemies hit harder, namely Swarm Disaster 5, so that's another consideration for you to make. You can't really heal your team if they're not alive anymore. I wanted to quickly touch on Lynx since she's the first 4-star abundance that we'll get aside from Natasha. I won't go into too much detail since I plan on making a similar video to this for her, but the Xuan banner becomes that much more valuable with Lynx on it. If you do manage to snag a copy of her, or multiple, she seems to be a capable healer that can AoE cleanse, which will be huge in removing CC, dots, and other debuffs. The only question will be how comfortably she can solo sustain, but either way, she'll add a ton of value to the banner since she's only the 3rd healer that's been released. So, my initial impression of Xuan is that she's a complete character that can just do it all. She can buff, crit rate, HP, reduce damage, heal, everything. She'll make your runs a lot comfier, and she can enable your other characters to do more damage. As far as pull value goes, I'll be giving her a solid 3.5 tile rating out of 4 on our tile rating system. I still have to figure out what that means, but 3.5 out of 4 is pretty darn good. While I think she'll no doubt be a solid character, she's definitely not a must pull, and even less so if you have one or more of the available sustain options today like Bailu, Gepard, or Luocha. Just know though that she'll make your life a lot easier if you don't have any of these options. As always, if you're on the fence about pulling, I'd recommend waiting. Actually, it doesn't matter. I'd recommend waiting for further testing after she's released officially anyway, especially once her numbers are available to us. These are just my thoughts based on my knowledge of the game. Let me know in the comments whether you'll be pulling her or not, and if you are, what teams you'll be running. I can't wait to test her out in Mono Quantum and as a hyper carry, so stay tuned for those videos. Thank you for watching, and if you found any of this information helpful, do consider dropping a like and subscribing. I'd appreciate it a lot. Best of luck with your pulls, and I will see you next time. Also, real quick, by the time this video is uploaded, I'm probably streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/artumbo, so make sure to check me out.